Hello, puppies and kittens. We are now going to be talking about a little bit of the political scene. Today's the first activist we're going to be talking to is Mandisa Lateefah Thomas, who is working on getting out the vote to promote Democratic senators in Georgia, the important runoff race that might decide who holds the majority in the Senate. Mandisa, how would
Yes.
you? First of all, how are all things, and what's going on in your part of the world?
Well, we're anxiously awaiting the results of the runoff election, like the rest of the country. And there is excitement, especially for those of us who are progressive, that the race has gone the way it has, because this is the first time in a long time that Georgia has gone almost completely blue. We live in Atlanta, which is very progressive and pretty liberal, but the rest of the state of Georgia hasn't caught up yet. So
I've heard stories about Georgia, so
yes. Mm-hmm.
kind of famous for that, it seems. So, what is interesting about this particular runoff?
Well, what's interesting is that, for one, the Democratic seats, the Democratic candidates, Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, who is the former lead pastor for Ebenezer Baptist Church. I kind of don't like that he's running on the Reverend, platform, but
I guess that would work though in Georgia, wouldn't it?
it wouldn't, but I guess it wouldn't hurt him. But he seems to be, progressive enough to where he's fighting for everyone. But these two Senate seats could very well determine the majority in the White House and in Congress. So these two seats are very, very important to Biden's administration, because it could, not that I wouldn't say the Democrats would never, have been bullies, but not like the Republicans. So for Biden's incoming administration, he would have a majority Democratic House, which is very important for passing certain legislation and getting certain things done.
Yeah. So I got some questions about the Republicans that are running against in this case, because I've heard some kind of interesting things about both of them. I forget her name, the blonde woman.
Kelly Loeffler.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And there was a recent picture where she's posing with the leader of the KKK.
Oh, that wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, there's still a very, very, even in the county where I live, right? We're in the metro area, but it's still one of those good old boy counties where there's a lot of Republicans, and there are a lot of ties to the KKK and a lot of ties to, that good old boy network. Even though the Republicans here will try to, put on those, family, conservative family values basis. But that certainly would not that isn't surprising at all, that she's pictured with someone, who is with the KKK. Not at all.
Well, she's blonde enough to be a Fox News anchor, so why not? How would you contrast the two senators Democrat side, two senators Republican side in this race?
Well, Jon Ossoff, for example, he's younger, and he's coming in very unapologetic. I mean, there was a commercial where I think he went off on someone. He actually Ossoff went off. And the thing about that was, instead of it working against him, it worked in his favor, because they are, both him and Warnock, and as they've been, and I know Warnock has been endorsed by Stacey Abrams. I think they've both been endorsed by Stacey Abrams, who ran for governor 2 years ago here in the state of Georgia. And former President Obama, I think, endorsed him as well. And because they're younger and don't seem to be a part of that old guard of politics down here. There's a lot more promise that they bring to the Senate and to Georgia that is much needed here. Even though, yes, they're still, male, but the fact that you have a younger white Democrat and, a Black Democrat who is very well tied into the community and who seems, who is more on the ground. So this is the type of shakeup that Georgia and the country really needs.
So how do you see this going? I mean, I think somebody posted the question, what does Mandisa see happening on the ground in the Georgia Senate race?
Well, we're getting a lot of, we certainly are getting a lot of notices about voting, a lot of notices about the candidates. We're hearing a lot of these ads, bold for, and, we're seeing a lot of attack ads. We're seeing a lot of, the campaigning, which is to be expected. So that's pretty much what is on the ground here. I mean, it's hot and heavy, on that campaign trail, on the voting, advertisements. And so, that's
because there's a lot of national attention in this case.
Absolutely there is. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, because the state of Georgia majority now, it's still a slim majority, but it's a majority nonetheless. That the state of, that more people voted for Biden overall than Trump. So that is, that's pretty historic, considering that for all the years that I've been here and voted for president, Georgia has always been red, always been a red state. But it's getting national attention now because it was one of the battleground states that determined Biden's election. It's also national attention because Stacey Abrams, who was cheated out of that governor's race when she ran 2 years ago against the incumbent Secretary of State, who basically decided that they wanted to, all of a sudden they wanted to start enforcing certain voting criteria, which shut out a lot of people from, which prevented a lot of people from voting. And so that didn't go over well. That wasn't, people didn't forget that. And so now that we have, the presidential race, and we have these 2 Senate seats up for grabs, and there were more minorities, more people of color that were running for these offices, people were paying attention. And like you said, it's getting national attention. It certainly is getting a lot of attention in the state of Georgia, but now the whole country's really watching.
I don't mean to put things into hard cast categories, like when I'm contrasting Democrats and Republicans. I'm fully aware that had I been an adult in the year that I was born, then I would have then in 1962, I would have been a proud Republican then.
Mm-hmm.
Because people often bring up, the problem with the Democrats is that they were founded by the KKK, or there was a lot of their members were KKK back in the day. Well, that's true. They were then.
Right.
And
right.
What party does all of the KKK belong to now? And then that argument is shut right up.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So I know that it's not just the party, that the party can change, but the thing that I want to call attention to at this moment is when we have a large voter turnout, when everybody's voting, then the Democrats are favored. And so this is why the Republicans are going out of their way, and have for a long time gone out of their way, to try to restrict the vote, to get as few people to vote as possible, to discourage the vote. Here in Texas, our beloved governor just like pulled the plug on all of these voting stations. So there's just like, if you're going to hand in a ballot, you've got one place per county.
Wow.
And think about some place like Houston.
Yeah, which is huge. That's a huge city. Jeez.
So it's just amazing to me that these people can do this shamelessly, because they don't have a conscience in what they're doing.
Right. But to them, it's just politics as usual, like it's just a part of the business. Or like, oh, well, politics are dirty. And they're like, okay, well, no hard feelings, especially if their side wins.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and then if I could just throw this out there, I know that on the Democrat side, or what we'll call the Democrat side, for lack of a better description, there's a lot of independents, there's a lot of progressives like ourselves, and not everybody identifies as Democrat, but we have to vote Democrat because it's a two-party system and everything. But so far, even though he hasn't actually taken office yet, I know that like Biden was like not anybody's first choice.
Right.
Everybody had a favorite ahead of him. But and my wife and I were talking about this today, that even though he was neither of our first choices, I'm actually kind of pleasantly surprised by the things he did that I would not have predicted that he would do. Somebody like the appointing a Native American for for the interior and all of that. Some of the things he's done, I write it out. I have a tendency to weigh things, the pluses and negatives. I mean, like Obama, I had to weigh the positives and negatives. He came out net positive.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that I didn't have complaints.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And with Bill Clinton, I supported and promoted him initially, and by the end of his second term, I hated him.
Okay. Yeah.
It's just because we do have to weigh the positives and negatives. We can't just blindly follow an ideologue, which seems to be the Republican position right now, that we're going to follow this guy. It doesn't matter that we called him a pathological liar or that he insulted our wife last. We're going to support him blindly now.
Part of me though wonders if a lot of Republicans flipped, though, if they switched, because of the fact that this man has been such an embarrassment, not just to the party but to the country. I mean, he has been for years, right? I mean, if we follow the Trump saga, and if anyone was paying attention, even way back, even as far back as to the 1970s, even though I wasn't born until 76, but he has a long history of not just being a bully, but being a horrible business person and screwing people over. And so, the same, I think a few of them probably, and I can't say for sure, but I'm pretty sure, like I said, I mean, I probably just contradicted myself there, but I'm just saying, I think probably more of them voted either Democrat this time around, or they may have sat this election out because, I mean, just the thought or the prospect of Trump being president again may have been, disconcerting to them. Now, it does say something to see a majority, especially white women, the majority of white women who voted for Trump, I think both in the 2016 election and the 2020 election. It says a lot for who supported him. But I think now with the number of people that he's pissed off, especially this year with the pandemic, I'm thinking that probably a lot of people were like, enough is enough.
Yeah. Well, he did an awful lot of damage, and the latest reports, which I'm noticing that they're just now putting in concise messages what we'd seen before, where he'd be hinting about herd immunity, although he called it herd mentality because his mentality. But we knew that was what he was going for all along. That he wasn't. That herd immunity meant you don't do anything, just let everybody get infected. And now we've got there's emails where they actually made the statement, we want everyone to get infected, so it'll ride this out, and it's bewildering to me. I can't convince Trump supporters that he does. Well, I can't convince them that anything is really happening, because they have a completely different body of facts from their news stations, and they're not going to hear a word I say.
Right.
That's frustrating. I mean, I walk in yesterday, to my mom's place. I walk in there and she's watching Fox News, and they're talking about the hoax, the electoral hoax that the Democrats have heard. Like, okay, Mom, think. 50 court cases, really, 50 of them, all thrown this out. Oh, it's because Facebook and Twitter censor the news. Excuse me, I'm watching Senate hearings directly. I'm not getting reports of but think about it. If I'm reading the rulings and I'm reading the transcripts of the cases, and here it is, Rudy Giuliani admitting in court that he does not have any evidence of fraud, I think that means that he has no evidence of fraud.
Basically, right.
I mean, so how is it, Mom? What is it? Is it that every Democrat and every Republican judge, even the judges that were appointed by Trump himself, all of them, every
Right.
Republican senator, they're all in on the great conspiracy, and everybody's
Right.
lying except the guy on Fox News.
Right.
Fox News is the one thing that only the liars aren't lying, and everyone else is. But there's no way to get through.
I know, and sometimes you just have to decide how much of that you're going to engage and entertain, because I mean, you're going to give yourself a headache. I mean, it says a lot that the Supreme Court, in which were some of his appointees, said, you know what, they threw the cases out. They're like, look, there's no fraud here. Like, you lost.
It's a weird political environment where we don't have the same facts and can't talk the same language, because it somehow or other Bill Gates created the virus, and Tom Hanks is drinking baby's blood while worshiping Satan. I'm like, oh,
I don't know.
And then my own family tells me, and you can't prove he's not.
Oh my gosh! Yeah. Oh boy.
So
you're better than me.
Getting back on topic, what secular issues are affected in the Georgia Senate race? Hold on a second. Dogs, shut up. Stop it. I have 2 dogs playing right under my chair while I'm trying to conduct business.
See, well, at least it isn't the parrot.
Yeah. I was on a podcast once that says somebody said, "I think your mom's calling you." I'm like, no, that is my bird.
Oh my gosh. So of course it's the pandemic. You know, we want to make sure that everyone is still following fact-based guidelines and evidence-based guidelines. Certainly people whose jobs and livelihoods have been impacted by COVID. And the fact that, and as well as the administration's ineffectiveness at preventive measures. Certainly the racial justice factors. Absolutely. The fact that, I know some people use the term defund the police. Some people would prefer police reform. Certainly institutional factors that affect especially members of our communities.
Can you clarify what police reform means, just for anybody that might be confused about that?
Well, the slogan now is defund the police, and from what I understand, it doesn't mean defund entirely, but that there are resources that are allocated elsewhere, and that law enforcement does not always have the right to respond with such deadly measures, especially when it's uncalled for. But I also think it stands for, if I'm not mistaken, it stands for better training, also incorporating measures that don't have to resort to violence, and just definitely an overhaul of law enforcement and demilitarizing, meaning that there won't be as much there won't be as much funding for military style equipment for law, and especially for local.
Small town cops shouldn't have heat rays or
exactly
audio weapons or tanks
or stuff like that, right?
Have you seen the audio pulse thing that it's supposed to blow your ear? This is a police department, in some small town somewhere gets this audio pulse weapon, and then there's another one that has a heat ray, and several that have tanks and so forth.
Right, I'm like, what do y'all need that for? Seriously.
Yeah, and we all have examples, I'm sure, like a whole long list of them, of things we've seen where, like, a cop goes on to break up a pool party of high school kids, grabs some 15-year-old black girl and slams her into the ground and puts his hand on his gun. What the fuck are you doing? These are kids in their backyard pool, but there doesn't seem to be there's no recourse. I mean, there's what happened with internal affairs. that cops can just kill with impunity all the time.
Right. And this is a national problem.
I used to teach I used to teach middle school, and I never had to shoot any children that were involved in fights or even grab anyone. You
Right.
can just de-escalate a lot of situations without resorting to
So
violence if you're the
your
authority.
efforts specifically would be interesting here. What are you doing to help get out the vote, and what efforts are going on right now by yours and other secular organizations in Georgia?
Well, of course, because Black NonBelievers is nonprofit. We have to be nonpartisan, so we cannot endorse any candidates. I am encouraging people to vote, and on my personal behalf. So I have to give that disclaimer. We do encourage the voting process. We were a part of the Secular America Votes campaign, in which we encourage people to, of course, to register to vote and to get out and vote their values. Vote for the candidates that are most likely to speak and to represent and to and to actually go into in the Congress or the Senate and actually vote for and make the changes that are necessary for the people. So and then there's there's been efforts to try to get people to phone bank. People have been canvassing their neighborhoods, because I personally am in an immune compromised home. I have to limit my contact with the general public. So I've definitely made sure that my family and I, for everyone who is of voting ages, we make sure that we voted. Absolutely. And I actually vote on election day, because I know early voting was very, very prevalent, especially this year, for a number of reasons, mainly due to COVID. But we made sure we got out there on election day and voted, because that still mattered. And January 5th, we will be doing the same. And so, the other day, I was part of a fundraiser for the Fair Fight Action, Stacey Abrams' organization, to help raise money for for the races for John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock. So, and I think that was important, because I do consider myself a secular Democrat, and who is leading a nonprofit organization. But it is important for us to openly state our identities, so that so that when this time comes, and not just the midterm or national elections, but when it comes to community events, our representatives absolutely need to know who we are.
Speaking of which, has Stacey Abrams ever met you?
Not yet. There was an attempt to introduce us a couple of years back by the advisory chair for the Secular Coalition for America, and she never responded. I imagine that she was busy. It was a campaign, she was on the campaign trail. But I thought it was very interesting that she did kind of get out. She actually stopped by Dragon Con and talk with folks, which I thought was very interesting. And I know she's still very religious. She tends to be a little churchy, especially in her speeches. So I don't think that meeting with me at that time she might not have felt that was in her best interest. But I'm hoping that certainly will change in the future, because I have met with candidates who were running for office. And I told them who I was. I told them who I represented, and we actually talked on some issues. And they were, when I told them who I was, they were like, "Oh, okay. Well, we'd like to hear more from you." Well, good, because your constituency is made up of some of everyone, including those of us who don't believe or who don't go to church anymore. And so it's about time that you hear from us.
So personally, you've got the Black NonBelievers nonprofit, and I get the impression that you are working with a number of other organizations at the same time. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. And that's think you've already listed all of them?
Have I?
You went through a list. I don't, you mentioned some other people that you were working with. I didn't know if that was the full list or not.
Well, that was just the Secular Democrats of America on the voting issue. That was so far. But when it comes to who else I work with within the secular community, of course, it's all of our affiliated organizations: American Atheists, the American Humanist Association, the Secular Student Alliance, and a lot of our organizations are involved with the Secular America Votes campaign. Because while we cannot endorse certain candidates, we certainly can encourage people to do their civic duty. And this is what we've always encouraged that as an organization. We tell our members, you get out there and you vote, and you know your candidates, do the research, and if you have it within you to do so, stay involved. Stay involved with that process, because it doesn't stop once the elections are over. The work goes on, once the issues are out of the media.
I'm feeling that way. I mean, okay, so Biden won this election, but that doesn't mean that we're done. Certainly not. I mean, there's so many goals that need to be met, and there's so much work that needs to be done. I actually feel like I'll be probably more busy over the next 4 years than I was over the last 4 years, just because of how much needs to be done. And we mentioned voter suppression earlier, and I just think it's interesting. You tell people to get out to vote, and it's frustrating to me to meet people who say that their vote doesn't count,
right?
For example, or that if the vote didn't count, then why would the Republicans be trying so hard to limit your access to voting? Obviously. Right. It does count. So that's just like the worst argument that I've ever heard. And the other ones who say, well, both parties are just as bad, but very often seen as both sides are, because a lot of people see this as somehow a left or right situation.
Right.
Both sides are the same. No, they're fucking not. Yeah, you could say fairly that both sides are bad. Okay. Are they as bad?
Right. Right.
Not even close. So, and it's not even a lesser of two evils thing. I mean, like if people are people, nobody's perfect. But then we have one side where we have people demonstrating acts of just willful evil.
Yes.
So on the voter restrictions, we were talking about some of the things that the Republicans have done for gerrymandering and for closing polling places, closing down all the polling places so that everybody has to stand in long lines, closing the places off where you can put in your ballots and so forth. What is being done to counter, or what voter suppression is being done in Georgia, and how are people trying to counter that?
As far as I know, there are a lot of people like doing the canvassing. I think there's a lot of emphasis on making sure that people know their correct precincts where they need to go vote, and to make sure that their current information is up to date. Because like most states, the state of Georgia does go by your current address and your driver's license. And so what happened with the 2018 gubernatorial election was that I think even if there was like one letter off, they were just qualifying people from voting, which was just absolutely ridiculous. But I think now there's a better effort to make sure that people's information is more up to date. And that they are aware of where they need to vote. And I know that there were a lot of places, some churches included, that were escorting like either the elderly or people who needed a ride to their polling place. So they were escorting folks. They were truly assisting, and there were a lot of people who did sign up to work the polls, because that process is also important. My hat goes off to, or my imaginary hat goes off to those who work those polls. It's not easy, and when you especially on election day, and for those who have to count the votes. So I think there were more people who got involved, and there were a lot of people who were making sure that the younger folks got out and voted, and that they made sure that they knew that their votes mattered. So, and then because we often hear that whole, well, both parties are the same, or my vote doesn't count, from the younger folks. So there was a concentrated effort on making sure that they understood how important this election was, and that everyone who had the opportunity to vote, whether it was in person or voting by mail, had the chance to do so. So that's how the voter suppression was countered, especially this time around.
So a lot of people may not realize it. I know people in my own family thought that the Texas thing that was supposed to go before the Supreme Court, they think that the Texas claim was of evidence of voter fraud, when in fact it was complaints against other states for making laws to enable more people to vote. That's what Texas was complaining about, was that these other states were allowing more people to vote instead of restricting those votes. That's what the Supreme Court threw out. Yeah, but I'm having to argue with my family that they're suppressing evidence of voter fraud, but just no idea. The only thing being suppressed is people's votes, and it is being done largely through propaganda, through misinformation in all of the media, which is hugely frustrating for me, as I've been advocating against this forever, as you have too.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so you want to? I don't think we can cover much more on this. You're welcome to prove me wrong, but I was going to let you make whatever statement you think should be appropriate to close this out.
Absolutely. So even if you aren't in the state of Georgia, you can support the efforts to elect John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock. Do support the organizations that are campaigning for them, like the one that we supported the other day, the Fair Fight Act. If you know people that live in Georgia, do make sure that they will be voting either early or in person. Do make sure that they participate in the election. I know there are all eyes on us right now. And if you are in the state of Georgia, if you have the opportunity to phone bank or volunteer, then please do so. But also do make sure that you do vote, because this one really, really does matter. It really does. It really will make a huge difference for the incoming administration. And we have a great opportunity to show that we are doing our civic duties, that we are taking part in the political process, even if we aren't running for office. This is also a great opportunity for people to look into running for offices, for public office, because it can start with, being like a city council person, or, some other public office seat. So the only way to really, really make these changes is to truly get into it, and to get into it, start by voting, and just really, really start, doing the things that may have seemed impossible before, but it really is possible, especially once we pull together. So
yeah, I'd like to encourage people to go to run for public office too. I did it and I didn't like it because it's just not for me. But
yeah.
I have seen some people that were very successful at it. I mean, even the red state of Arizona elected nine open atheists.
Yes, they did. Yes. And so it doesn't change until we really start to step up and speak up. And it can be a challenging thing to do. It really can. We can't take away from that, but it really does start change people. It does start to change people's minds. It helps create a better understanding, and it really does help towards working towards what we are looking for.
Hold on a second.
Okay.
Someone, I don't know, did we go over Black Lives Matter somehow in this conversation? Because
Not
someone,
completely, I don't think, but we did touch on like the racial justice aspect and like police defunding the police,
Mhm.
reform in a lot of ways. So
because someone in the chat was saying that uh, somehow like that Black Lives Matter is race baiting in some way,
oh my gosh.
and if you have a problem with Black Lives Matter, then you have the race problem, not the organization. The organization is, you can read their statements. They're peaceful. They're working for justice. People are allowed to represent their communities, even their racial communities, without being accused of doing something nefarious like racism
Right.
or whatever.
Yeah.
People just cannot get over Black Lives Matter.
Right.
I don't get it myself. I mean, it doesn't mean that only Black lives matter. And if it is true that all lives matter, which technically it is true that all lives matter, but that also means that you should logically be able to say that Black lives matter. If all lives matter, then Black lives matter. You should be able to utter that sentence.
Right.
Someone is doing it in the chat right now. They're saying that Black Lives Matter somehow means that white life doesn't.
Yeah,
Well, I mean,
address.
what's their proof of that? I mean, how have they been able to try to substantiate that?
Right, and
I mean,
it's saying that cancer victims' lives matter. Is that saying that heart attack victims' lives don't?
Let's not give any more credence to that. I didn't want to end on this note.
Yeah.
They always have to distort things, though.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, we
have to
can
ignore those.
Yeah, we will have to. All right, Mandisa Lateefah Thomas, always impressed with your activism. I'm going to put links down below for your Patreon because Mandisa is a full-time activist. This is all she does, and she needs all the help we can get. Same thing goes for Lalandra and myself. So if you have the means, please support, and you're interested in what we're doing, please support all of that. And I'll go ahead and close it out.
Awesome. And before we go, if I could make a plug for BN's 10th anniversary celebration, which will take place in January from the 15th to the 17th in New Orleans. We are having a socially distanced in-person gathering, but also we will be streaming it online. So you can go to blacknonbelievers.org for more information on that.
Excellent. Thank you.